Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, wherever you're tuning into this particular expert interview in the Productivity Summit. And we really have a special treat for this particular segment because we have somebody who is arguably one of the most productive people that you'll probably ever have a chance to meet, and that's David Sparks. And so he's an attorney by trade, but gosh, you probably know him from Max Sparky, from any number of podcasts that he's producing regularly. He's an amazing guy and he knows his stuff, and he's a darn nice guy too. And so, David, we just want to welcome you to the summit and see if there's anything you'd like to add to that introduction.
You did a great job, Mike. I feel very privileged to be here. I was telling you beforehand, I have a lot of friends that work in nonprofit, and they're some of the hardest working people I know. So anything I can do to help you guys out, I'm here for you.
Well, thank you very much. So let's start with just this concept of automation. And I was at a meeting recently with several of my colleagues, and we were just kind of, having a drink, going around the circle. And I said, "Oh, what do you do for automation? Do you use Siri shortcuts? Do you use text expander?" And they all looked at me like I had 12 heads. and
Sure.
and I just
Sure.
thought, ooh, that kind of makes me sad in a way because I know the joy I get from sending out a text expander snippet and things like that. So why don't you kind of take the mystique out of automation for us? Let's start there.
Yeah, just to think about automation in general, it's interesting because automation now is turning into a bad word because there's a different kind of automation that's going to start costing people their jobs, and a lot of people are afraid of it. But for information workers, for people who sit at a computer and do their work, automation can make a massive difference. And the way I like to think about it is, what are you paid for? Where is your true value? And your true value isn't in typing emails, it's in strategizing. And it's not in, dragging files. It's in thinking about the big picture. How do we land the next big donor or whatever it is that you're thinking about? So, and computers are really good at that stuff. Computers are not smart. They can't think about the big questions like you and I are talking about, but they can do the dumb little stuff that we have to spend our time on. And embracing computerized automation is a way to, number one, get the drudgery out of your day, and number two, give you more time to focus on what's important, and even hopefully get your work done faster so you can go take a break or walk in the park or go play with your dog or do something else. You don't have to work all day, spinning your wheels on little things. So to me, automation is kind of a key to letting you focus on what's most important.
And you're actually, I think, the perfect person to speak to nonprofits because you've been practicing law, you were part of the big firm experience, and then you went off on your own. And
Sure.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you haven't, it's not like you've had, 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 partners and a ton of admins to hand things off to. So in your own
Yeah.
personal practice, my sense is you've had to automate a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And even when I was in the firm, I did a lot of automation because it was just faster for me to have the computer do it for me than to send it down to somebody else to do and get it back in 2 or 3 days. And the beauty of automation is once you start figuring it out, it's a little difficult. I think this is the hang up people have. It's like, well, I don't want to spend the time to learn how to use this specific automation app. And you're right that the very first time you use it, it's going to take longer to set it up than it would have been just to do it yourself, whether it's like a text expansion snippet or something that automatically sends emails for you or, whatever the automation is. But once you build that skill set, it's like superpowers, it's like the rocket jets. And now once you've got it built, everything that comes into your life that involves typing, you can use it on. And very quickly, you will find that it saves you a ton of time. But it's just that initial hump. So in the firm, I got over that hump early, and just adding additional automations to take care of problems for me was very simple. And then once I went out on my own, it became even more important.
We know that you're going to help us understand perhaps some multi-stage automations, but I mean, here's just a simple one for people on the summit. I help coach my son's soccer team, and it's youth soccer. It's not like there's a scoreboard anywhere. And we're always wondering how many minutes are left in the half. So I just created a
Yeah.
Siri shortcut and I just say, "Hey Siri, soccer game," and it starts
Yeah.
the countdown. And I know that seems like on the outside, like what's the big deal? I mean, it's just a
Yeah,
timer for a half of a soccer game. But when you're
yeah,
using that every single week over and over again, it makes life a little bit easier. So help
yeah.
us understand a skill or two that a nonprofit leader is doing every single day that perhaps some automation steps could help to make it a little bit easier.
I think one of the easiest ways to get started with automation in any business, but particularly nonprofit, is text expansion. And there's a lot of ways to do that. If you're on Windows or Mac, they have built-in text expansion services in the operating system. Like, for instance, on my computer, if I type cell with two C's, CCELL, it types in my cell phone number, which is just a dumb little thing that I do, but it's so much easier to type that than to actually go up to the number keys and get the dashes and the parentheses and everything right for my cell phone number. So it's just a little automation that saves me a lot of time. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is how powerful these tools have gotten from third-party applications. And there's a lot of them out there. The one that I like the most, and they do sponsor one of my podcasts, so take it for what it's worth, but is Text Expander, and they are a company that makes this really powerful text expansion application because not only does it allow you to do the basics like Windows and Mac does, but it allows you to go beyond that. Like it allows you to put the date string in. So you can put today's date in a text expansion snippet. Or you can put a fill-in field, which is really handy. Like if you're sending a lot of emails that say the same thing to different people, you can trigger it and you can put in the subject line. Let's say in subject line, let's say this is the November 2021 pledge drive. And you can actually have it figure out that this is November and this is 2021. So it puts the month and the year in automatically. And then the application hits the tab key. So you trigger the snippet in the subject line of an email. So you might say, pledge drive with no space. And it does. It says November 2021 pledge drive. And then it's the tab key. It goes to the next section and it says dear, and it has a fill-in field. So you type in dear Mike. It's going to go to Mike. And then it automatically puts the comma in for you and hits the carriage return and types 3 paragraphs of text, puts your signature in. And so writing that email that normally would take you a long time now takes you as long as it takes to write the words pledge drive with no space. And I do that for my law practice and for my Max Sparky stuff every day. And you start building up this bank of snippets. And the reason why I think this is a great place to start is because they're super easy to create this. All you do is you open an application and you type it in what you want. In fact, one of the best ways to do this is to catch yourself when you're typing something in an email. And you're like, well, wait a second. I write this all the time. Why am I typing this over and over again? So you just copy it and then you open the application, you paste that text in for an email you've already written. And now you've got a snippet that will send that email for you. And I know a lot of folks that spend so much time in email where it just doesn't make sense. And this is like a very great way to get started with automation.
I totally agree. And I think you're right. The thing is just notice, am I typing something over and over again?
Yeah,
We use Squarespace at work for our email. And I'm
yeah,
the web guy, so the number of
yeah,
times that I am entering in squarespace.com in the browser every day, I just have a text expander snippet. And again, I know that seems like such a small thing. Those small things add up. And I think our nonprofit work is, like you said, we want to bring our best selves to it and not be filling our day with 10% of kind of crap that we could just
mhm,
automate. I have a nerdy question for you. So
sure.
we do a weekly show, and I thought I had a really awesome snippet because the Friday before I'll send a message to the speaker saying,
Yeah,
and it's just exclamation point OFF. I think that's what
yeah,
the snippet is. And it's dear, we're so looking forward to seeing you
yeah,
next week at office hours. Here's the Zoom link. Here's my cell if you have
yeah,
any questions. And then what I do is I manually will put in the date. It sounds like you're saying I could make it even better and it
yeah.
could automatically pull the date.
Yeah. So in Text
Ooh.
Expander, there you can drop in the date. You can even do date math in Text
Uh-huh.
Expander. So you
Uh-huh.
could say, give me a date that's 2 weeks from today or 3 days before today, and it'll put those dates in. So if you send that snippet out, always on the Friday before the Monday recording, you could say, in 4 days or 3 days, and you can have it actually put the date of the recording in automatically as well.
Mm,
And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole because I know a
right.
lot of folks listening have never done this, but you can even go further. I have on the Mac, because I know not everybody uses Mac, but I use the Apple products. I have written an Apple script that when it sends out the email, it just grabs the first name of the recipient from the to line in the email and types the person's name in for me, so I don't even have to do the fill in. So you can go, like, as you go further into this, you can get it more and more advanced. I just got an email from a listener because I have a podcast where I talk about all this stuff, and she's a teacher, and she was telling me how she uses Text Expander for student evaluations because she found that there's like 20 things that she writes about students over and over again when she's doing these evaluations. So she just started collecting them, and she just fills them in with snippets, so she doesn't have to type them every time. And then she can always add additional personal stuff at the end. But she was telling me that it saves her like hours and hours every time she has to do student evaluations. And I think that's the kind of thing that anybody can do. I mean, one of the things about automation is I think a lot of people are afraid of it. They think they need to be a computer programmer to take advantage of it. And automation tools have come a long way. They're very user friendly. And if you just spend an afternoon learning how to use them, you will get that time back. I mean, the tool I was just talking about, Text Expander, actually takes your average typing rate and then it gives you a report like every month to tell you how many hours you saved.
Mhm.
And if I look at those stats for like a year, I think last year I saved like 3 days of time with Text Expander snippets. The three I would have
Amazing.
spent here for 3 days typing for all the stuff that I had automatically typed for me. And um, don't be afraid of this, guys, because you're looking to do your best work. And your best work isn't you sitting there like a robot typing out text. Your best work is using your brain to make, the product better or get, better proposals out or, do the work that you're truly there to do and make it, more effective.
How about in the area, we talked about email, how about in the area of calendaring? I mean,
Yeah,
I use Calendly, but there are many different resources that can be used. Is that an opportunity for nonprofit leaders?
I think so. I mean, it kind of gets into a much bigger discussion about what do you do with a calendar. I mean, when we grew up, we were all told that the calendar is where we put our dentist appointments in. And, maybe we put in if you need to get your car serviced or if you have to go to a fancy meeting. But calendars can be a much more powerful tool. Like, let's say that you need to do grant proposals, and that's the thing that really makes the difference at your job. If you can get the grant proposals out, the money flows, and then suddenly everything gets a lot easier. But you find that you never have time to write grant proposals, even though intellectually that's the most bang for your buck time that you can spend. You can use calendars to automatically schedule that time for you. Like maybe you say every Wednesday morning from 8 a.m. to 12, I'm not going to take any calls and I'm going to write grant proposals. So you can go into your calendar system and create a repeating event. And that's just a standing event. And it just shows up on your calendar. So when people want to set meetings with you or when you're looking at other things you could do, you think, nope, I'm protecting that time because that's the most important thing. And I think we should all change our attitudes towards calendars. We can think about the things that we truly want to do and aren't getting done and carve out time using a calendar. And then it goes beyond that with automation, because you can also now use automation to send confirmations out for your meetings and do other things as well. I mean, it's a whole thing we could get into if we wanted.
Mhm. Let's talk about board meetings for a second, because every nonprofit that's worth its salt, they've got a board and they
Yeah,
meet regularly.
sure.
And my experience at nonprofits, those board meetings always sneak up on us, and it's kind of
Sure.
like, oh crap, it's
Yeah.
coming up in 3 weeks. How did that happen? And I
Yeah.
better make sure I'm ready and I have my reports and all that. And they really are repeatable tasks, but
Yeah.
a lot of times it's this scramble and it's a lot of manual work. So I don't know, any ideas related to board meetings and automation opportunities?
Yeah. I mean, so much. I mean, any major event in your job, you can automate around. Um, Text expansion comes to mind for creating reports for meetings. So like if you have a standard set of things you report at a board meeting, you could have text expansion create the bones of that report for you. So you don't have to type in all the headings and the text that you type every time, and then you just focus on the stuff that changes. Um, for task management, there is automation tools now that let you automatically populate a project with tasks. Like if you have a checklist for a board meeting, and maybe it's like write the report, send out the introductory email, send out the reminder email, schedule the conference room, all of the things that you need to do for that. There's really something to the idea of checklists. And most of the better task managers these days, and no matter what platform you're on, this is true, whether you're on Windows or Android or Mac or iPhone, they have what they call templated, task projects. So you create a checklist and you can just run that checklist every time. And some of them even let you automatically generate it after a certain amount of time. So you could run it, you could say a month before the board meeting is scheduled, bring this checklist to my attention so I can start getting through it. I mean, they did a study recently at hospitals about, deaths in hospitals, and they weren't happy with people dying in hospitals as a result of accidents or mistakes that were in the healthcare. And one of the things they realized is that there were certain periods of time where people were particularly at risk to mistakes and accidents. Like one of them is when people are administering medication. So if a nurse is giving you pills and she's got 3 or 4 people or he's got somebody talking to him, you don't want them to be interrupted because they're administering your pills. They give you the wrong pills, you might die. So they made checklists for the nurses about how to give the pills, and like they wear a special, vest that says I'm doing the pill administration and nobody can interrupt me. And they've got a checklist they go through. Well, I know a board meeting isn't administering pills, but it's the same concept. If you take these mission critical things you're doing in your life and you apply checklists to them, you just won't make mistakes on them. I mean, there's a reason why when you get on an airplane, the pilot, before he takes off, is he checks everything. They don't want to figure out when they're in the air that the wheels aren't working or whatever. So that is I think a very useful tool for folks, and completely subject to automation. And I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I get excited when I start talking about this stuff.
No, I do too. Now, how about for the nonprofit leader who says, David, my strength is with people. I'm in front of donors. That's my strength. I've got great emotional intelligence. I'm a communicator. When I get back to the office, I'm a mess. I've got 1,000 emails in my inbox. I'm so intimidated by anything related to technology. So is there any way to marry that reality, which could be very real for a lot of people, and maybe some of these opportunity gains on the automation side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a person who needs to take this seriously. It's an area of weakness for you. It's not that you're bad at it. It's like, the whole thing back I grew up in the 70s, and somebody told me in art class, you're bad at art. I remember being a little kid, my teacher saying, well, you're just not good at art. So I just accepted the narrative that I'm not good at art. And then a few years ago, I started doing some art, and you know what? It wasn't too bad. I even got a couple pieces hanging here. So I don't think you should accept that you are bad at this stuff. I just think you should accept that you don't have the skill set yet. And if you're a people person and computers intimidate you a little bit, get into some of these entry level automation tools so the computers can do that work for you. I mean, if email is a problem for you, and it's a problem for all of us, honestly, automation can really be your friend for that. And I know I keep banging on about text automation, but the reason I do is because I think that's the easiest entryway. It's the easiest on ramp to this stuff, because all the automation is you trigger it by typing a phrase, and then it types a bunch of stuff for you. And I think that's something anybody can master in a short amount of time. And if you've got a lot of email, that can be really helpful.
Would you recommend that people are processing, and when I mean processing, I mean really going through email for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, would you recommend they do that sitting down at a desk versus on their phone?
Well, to each his own, and it depends on what you're doing with email. but I feel like for me at least, on a computer, it's much faster. And I think the problem with email is that we have created this false equivalency among all email. And there's email that's important, your big donor or your board of directors, and you need to address that timely. But not all email is from a big donor or your board of directors. And for whatever reason, when we sit on a computer, we just go through the email in the order it came in. So we're giving people that are not our big donors and our directors more priority than the actual people that are more important. And that's another problem that's solvable by automation. On Apple Mail, for instance, you can create what they call a VIP list. All you do is you go to the person's name and your contact and you click the button for VIP. And now that person is flagged and their email shows up first. And there's even a special little folder all of it goes into. So spend your time on that email. And then if you get to the rest of the email, that's great. And if you don't, that's okay too, because you know that you hit the very important people email. And there's also services out there like SaneBox that you can pay for that will try to sort it for you. Google Mail does a similar feature where it tries to sort it for you. But don't look at answering all your email as the goal. I think your goal with email should be dealing with the important email. And if you don't get to all the rest of it, that's okay, because going out and working with your nonprofit is way more important than you answering an email about whether or not, I don't know, you won $1 million from some Arabian prince, or or even something that is not like maybe you buy your shirts from Lands' End and they sent you the sale. I mean, all that stuff, you don't need to see that when you're doing your work. And so I think I would try to reassess your relationship with email, but also use automation to surface the email that's really important. And I think what you'll find is, even if you have an inbox with thousands of email, once you figure out a way to pull the most important email to the top, there's not that much of it, and you can deal with that.
I haven't puttered too much with the focus modes in iOS 15. I'm wondering if you could speak to that. And is that, perhaps a cousin of automation that might help a person focus?
I hope so. I'm a big fan of anything that cuts down the interruptions from technology. I mean, I make a living teaching people how to use technology, but I also understand its limitations. And, the human brain is not good at multitasking. I don't care, what you've heard. We're just not good at it. So these digital devices in our pockets that can interrupt us anytime they want are a massive distraction to doing our most important work. And Apple has kind of addressed that with this most recent release of the iPhone and Mac software, where you can do what they call focus mode. And you can say, right now, I am doing an interview, so I don't want any disturbances. Or right now, I am going to a donor thing, and I don't want my phone buzzing me. But you can create exceptions, because we've always had do not disturb mode. You turn that on and it prevents people from getting through to you for a little while. But with focus mode, you can create little holes in that wall for, like, let's say your spouse or your kids, or maybe your, most important people you're working with at your office, so they can get through to you, but you can cut everybody else out. And having something in that place, in that, method, allows you to once again focus on what's most important and not letting the digital devices take over. And you can automate it too, but I mean, I think just manually turning it on can be really helpful. Right.
I'm just thinking, a person could have a focus mode for donor luncheon, or for board meeting, because like you say, the last thing that you want to be doing is getting buzzed when you're trying to have a really important conversation with prospective or current donor, or just an important person. So I wonder, David, one of our other guests on the summit is Mike Vardy, and he's going to be talking about how he themes his days in a week so that he knows what he needs to do. But I'd like to hear your take on that, because you're wearing a lot of different hats, just like a nonprofit leader would. How does David Sparks determine what I'm supposed to be working on each day of the week?
Yeah, I'm very deliberate with my calendar. I mentioned it earlier, but on Sundays, I go through and kind of apportion my week out for like this day, I'm going to work in this area of focus, or that day, I'm going to work on that area of focus. And so I try to have large blocks going into the week, and they're not always perfect. And sometimes things come up and I need to move things around. But starting the week with those blocks really helps me. And because my job is not entirely under my control, sometimes I need to just stop and think about it. If you've got a job where you don't have, donors and board members who can call you and turn everything upside down, it's a lot easier to do that. But for me, I've got the same problem with clients. A client will call me and say, this is really important, I need to do it. Well, I had no idea that problem existed on Sunday, but on Tuesday morning, it's my whole world. So I move things. I have to be flexible with it, but I do like the idea of what I call hyper scheduling or block scheduling, where I try to, in advance, determine what's going to get worked on during certain blocks of time. But the key to that, because when people hear about that, they're like, well, I don't want to be tying myself down. The key to that is to realize that that stuff is a plan. It's not set in concrete. You can always move things around if the circumstances require. But to generally think that on Wednesday morning, I'm going to work on my grant proposals, and on, Friday afternoon, I'm going to call donors, and, to have those kind of scheduling done in advance really kind of gives you a way to, work through the week.
I think for me, I'm pretty creative, but not in the moment. It's like when my wife says at 5 o'clock on Thursday night, what should we have for dinner? I'm good for nothing, but on Sunday night, thinking of the whole week ahead, I can be pretty jazzy in that sense. And I think the other thing is, willpower is pretty weak for a lot of us. And so, I would rather not have to start every day saying, what do I need to work on today? I'd really rather think that through once or twice a week ahead of time, because life comes at you, like you said, and it's a plan that's not so much in concrete.
Well, what I would say is that I feel like each person is different. But for me, my most productive time is the mornings. That's when I'm best, in terms of like recording content or doing serious client work. So I try to really preserve that time for that type of work. And then like the planning and what I would call the manager hat work, I will do that at the end of the day when I'm tired, because tired Sparky does a better job of planning how much I can actually do in a day than the morning one. Because if I let myself plan in the morning, I always give myself more work than I can actually do in a day.
Last question before we want folks to hear about some of the neat things that you have over at Mac Sparky is kind of related to that last point. Got a to-do list, whether it's on paper, bullet journal, OmniFocus, Todoist, whatever, and I'm unrealistic in terms of what I put down for a day. And so the day finishes, I roll a few things over, and maybe that's not such a big deal for one day, but 5 days of rollover leaves me as a nonprofit leader feeling really demoralized. So what's your counsel for that?
Well, I really think kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier about schedule blocking, that can really help. It's one of the easiest ways to kind of take control of this, because your task list is infinite, but your time is finite, and you can have 100 items on your task list, but when you look at realistically, how much time is each one of those going to take? And how many hours do I have in this day? And you compare those two, quite often you're going to see that you have bit off more than you can chew. So by planning your time out and then reserving time on your calendar to do those things, suddenly your task list gets smaller. And you will get the work done that you planned for, but no more. And the fact is, if you hadn't time blocked, you still wouldn't have got any more than that done. You probably would have got less done because you would have been flailing around among those 100 items. So I think bringing intentionality to bear on this stuff and saying, well, I only have 5 hours today that I can work on substantive work. What is the most important stuff on this list that I can do today in 5 hours? And then you intentionally set that time aside to do it. And you will feel better at the end of the day because you got the most important stuff done. And as opposed to just having a list of 100 items, you don't know what you're going to do. And because of that, you just pick some easy stuff off that really doesn't move the needle for you.
Right.
So I guess, this is, it's hard. It's easier to preach than to practice, but Be intentional, pick the few things that really are going to move the needle or matter for you, make time for them and stick to it. And it's really that simple.
Because your board when it's time for that board meeting, your board is not going to ask you if you got through all your emails. I promise
Yep,
you that.
exactly. Nobody
But
cares. Very
right.
few people, and there are some, but very few people's job is managing email. Their job is doing something else more substantive. And yet so many of us pride ourselves as the person who always has an empty inbox. And I feel like that is such a small thing. It doesn't matter, what really matters to your job or what you're passionate about, and make sure that is your point of pride, not having an empty inbox.
David, I'm really appreciative of your time, and I know you're kind of a reluctant salesperson, and yet I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about MacSparky and some of the different resources that you've built over the years. And one that I'll just give a shout out to is I purchased your OmniFocus field guide a couple of years ago, and I don't know what you charge, but oh my gosh, I mean the number of videos, so helpful. I airplayed it up to my big screen TV, and my family is like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "To me, this is relaxing. If I can learn just a few more things in OmniFocus, that's a real win." So I'd love for you to share with our viewers, our participants in the summit, a little bit about MacSparky and one or two products that you'd like to highlight.
Well, I'll tell you that one of my passions with my life is teaching people how to get better at this stuff. And I intentionally am not aiming my materials at computer programmers because they already know how to do this stuff. But people like nonprofits and dentists and stay-at-home spouses or whatever, people who just want to get better at their technology. So basically everything I do as MacSparky is aimed at that. I have several podcasts. One's called Mac Power Users. Another one's called Automators, which is all about automation, which we've been talking about today. And another one's called Focused, which is about keeping focus. All these things we kind of talked about today are themes of my life. And you can find all of those at macsparky.com. And I also make courses, and the courses are very slowly paced, so anybody can follow along and turn you into a power user in these various tools. And you can find all of those at learn.macsparky.com. And if you're interested in any of them in your nonprofit, send me an email. I hadn't thought of it until just this moment, but we'll make sure we get some kind of discount in for nonprofits. But just send us an email and we'll get you a code. And I'm really, I feel like the best good I do in this world is helping people get past this stuff. And I love hearing from people who buy a product or listen to a podcast and write me to tell me how they get to go home early to their kids, or how they're doing their best work now because they're not wasting time doing tedium with their technology. And really, that's what I'm all about. So you can find all of that over at macsparky.com.
David, thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Mike, and good luck to everybody. And the conference looks great. You've got some really amazing speakers lined up.